Good morning. Everybody had breakfast and coffee and everything cool. My name is Nikolai Lockertsen. I work as an illustrator and a concept artist. And I started in the movie industry in the late 90s, around 97, just as a runner on set. And then I moved more into digital, visual effects, animation, that kind of stuff in 2001. And I live in a small place in Norway called Moss, and then I commuted to Oslo, so that was about an hour each way. And at some point I was like, I need to use this hour efficiently. I need to get better as an artist. And you always have these small hours where you sit down, just wait to get somewhere, right? And I was kind of just started in digital. I didn't really paint digital until around 2005. So before that, I grew up illustrating, but I was kind of against the digital. I was like, no, that's the dark side. Let's stay away from that. You know, it's all traditional stuff is what's going on. But at the end, I saw that this has real power, and also to create light. Some of the things I really love is to create light and mood and colors. And to be able to tone things down and not begin on this enemy, this white paper, is nice, I think. So when I was commuting, I started out using watercolor. So I sat with my paper and the paint and a little bucket of water. And because I live in Norway, it's dark, so you have to have your light. So there's a book lamp and all this little paint studio on trying to balance that on the hand on the bus, and being self-aware enough to sort of like, don't mind me, I'm trying to paint here. So that was, that gives you a certain way, and it was nice. But then I'm like, isn't there some digital thing that I can use which is smaller than a laptop and which is more mobile? And then I wasn't an Apple fan at all to start with, but then I got the iPhone, and there was a little app there called Brushes that you can actually, I can actually doodle on the phone, digital. This is interesting. But it would be so much cooler if it was a bit bigger, and that I could, I like that you can just turn it on and off, and then suddenly it was the iPad, and I was like, that's the tool for me. That's where I can use that anywhere. And I guess I was one of the first one in Norway to sort of get it. That was the first iPad, and then I kept using Brushes on the iPad. It was a okay app. But you couldn't really do professional work with it, but you could do sketches that you could take into Photoshop and continue. But it was a good beginning. It really showed potential. And after a year or two, I discovered Procreate, and Procreate was just, yes, here, now we're talking. Procreate was sort of just a child back then. You had just 900 by 600 pixel canvas. It was sort of a bit smaller than the screen res on the first iPad, but the brushes and the brush engine and all that stuff, this was like, this is very good. This is like Photoshop. It's so easy to use, and it's very cool. And while using Brushes, I tried to contact the guy making it to sort of like come with suggestions, and in the year or two that I used it, I never got any response. But then I discovered Procreate, and I sent an email, and 2 hours later I had a response. So I was like, hey, they're listening to the artist. And since then we've been really good friends, and then buying this app for, I think $5 back then, and never had to pay any more ever since. And it's just this. I bought like a Toyota Starlet back then, but now I have the Lamborghini Diablo, and I didn't have to. They just come and switch it. I'll take this old car, and give you a new one, and don't have to pay for it. So that's part of the crazy thing about this app. It's become very, very good now. And when I think 3-4 years ago, when it came to its 1.7 update, then we suddenly have 4K. canvas. Since then, I done all my work on the iPad, professional and just and personal. And even sitting at work, where I worked at Storm Studios in Oslo, I had the big Cintiq, and I used it as a reference screen, and I sat and painted on the iPad. So people like, Nico, he's a crazy guy. But it was even before the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. I used speed sensitivity. So if you're fast, you can make it fade out or become a smaller. So size or opacity, you can hook to speed. And that was a pretty good. So if any of you are painting, like how many are painting on the iPad here now? Yeah. And do you all have iPad Pros or? Yeah. It's better, it's more intuitive with the pressure sensitivity. But also before that, it was a good replacement for pressure was the speed sensitivity. So it's still on an old iPad, you could do cool stuff. And one of the other things that I really loved about Procreate is that I never lost any work. In the 4 years I'm working with it, I never lost nothing. Not even when it crashes. It saves for each brush stroke you do, so you just 10 seconds later you're back to where you were. And I can't say the same about Photoshop. I also used Photoshop for many years. I also teach Photoshop, so it's I like that program. I have respect for it, but some things I really hate about it as well. So if I do matte painting or photo-based work, it sort of has to be Photoshop, but for everything, illustration, character design, concept art, then it's Procreate all the way. So the last year and a half I've been freelancing. I haven't opened Photoshop once, and it's very nice. So today I'm going to show you some new tricks. We recently had the 3.1 update for Procreate, and they've gotten some really awesome tools. Amongst other, the perspective tool, which is it's almost too good. It's almost like anybody can make a kick-ass environment now, Have any of you tried it, the perspective tool? Yeah? It's good, right? Yeah. And also the quick menu, that's a new thing. So I think I will go into Procreate now. And if you have any questions, it would be just cool to ask right away. Keep it like an open forum. Don't be afraid to ask. And if I don't have the answer for you, then we also have a representative from Savage, from Procreate, Matt Mescal. He's on the other side. So you can always, if there's something I can't answer, he might be able to answer. So it's cool to also have Procreate here. And I also want to mention one more thing, because we have me and Peter Spence, which is also on the other side. We have started this art study online, which some of you may know. Yeah, art study online, where I make Procreate tutorials, basically. So we have a good bunch of them there. And in your bag that you got when there's a free tutorial that you can download, check it out, see if you like it. If you like it, you can just check out the others, and yeah. And feel free to ask me. I'm going to be here all weekend, and don't be shy, come up and ask. Okay, let's see here. I just have to show you, like I kind of like the naturalistic stuff, but I think it's also a job I did recently was I did some Christmas cards for a grocery store in Norway. But it was a fun job because I also had to kind of mimic old Christmas cards to sort of get this kind of this painterly feel and to get the texture, and then I created a set of brushes that would feel like that, and then I also worked with the layers too. So it's because you can make your own brushes so easily in Procreate, also like in Photoshop, you can really tailor the look exactly like you want it, depending on the type of style you want for that image. And I think that's that's a strength that is really great. And you can take a picture of any texture, like on the wall here or on the floor or whatever, and make that into a brush, that texture with a brush. So it's really simple to use, and I'm going to show you pretty soon. I just wanted to show you another job that was quite fun to do. This was for the Norwegian railroad company. And this is 8K by 8K, so the resolution is like 56 megapixel. So it's pretty much detail. It took some time. I did 3 of these, or 2 of them is a lot of detail, and then 1 is a bit less. So you could really, even on the iPad with a 100 megabyte app for $5, you could still work 56 megapixel and still be a lot more stable than Photoshop. So that's. Yes. The thing with Procreate is that the more resolution, the less layers you can have. So this was really pushing the limit. So with this resolution, I could have 5 or 7 layers, I think. So then I had to kind of merge down and then just create a new, like when I was happy with the background, I had just exported that as a PNG, took that into a new file, and then I worked on the characters. And I was happy with the character layers. I merged that down to PNG with transparency around, and then you always had all the work files and all the layers that were just in separate projects in the gallery. So that's a workaround if you work on insane resolutions like that. But most often, yeah, and here's sort of me in the foreground. That was the last character because it's always, with the customer, it was, could we have less characters? Okay, then I took away from the original sketch, and then this boy can't sit alone, we need a new character in front, like we don't want to show that kids have to travel alone and all that stuff, so, well, then I'm going to sit there and take care of him, you know. And this dude in the background, this was a little boy. I'm like, can it be an adult sitting there instead? I was like, okay, mustache and glasses there, you see you're grown up. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's fun with the cartoony stuff. But it's also fun with a bit more crazy stuff. This was for Watership Down, you know, this old book. And they got the movie rights for it, and they want to make a movie or a TV series. I'm not totally sure. But I did some artwork for that, some character design, and 3 sort of concepts for it. So that was also nice. It's sort of like a merge between cartoony and naturalistic, which is a style I really like to work in. This is Hazel having just all the carrots he wants, and it's the first time in his life he had that. It's only the sort of the leader bunnies that had that before. But then there's also the really dark. It's a kind of a heavy story. It's not really a children's story, and it was an animation made many years ago, and it was pretty dark, and that fucked up a lot of kids. They had nightmares and stuff. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see where they're going with it now. Okay, Procreate. So when you want a new canvas, you just press the plus up in the right corner, and then the previous canvases and some of the defaults are there, or else you just press new canvas, and then you can dial in what kind of resolution you want. And there you also see right above the numbers, there you see the maximum layers. So right now it's 49 maximum layers. You see that? There. I wish I had like a laser pointer. But if I dial in like 8,000 here, then I got 22 layers. So this will adjust to what kind of resolution you want. But I will go with 4K on this one. And then you can also set the DPI, and then you can name it something if you want. And then just create. Cool. Nice. I'll have to aim like this. Yeah. Okay. So what I wanted to show first is mainly all of the brushes that I use is my own brushes, but you have, but you can have so much texture in them, so much playfulness, and it's really simple to make them. And they're just sort of, I'm just going to show a few brushes, how they are behaving and how, so this is like very light and then harder and harder, so the sensitivity is really great, and you can have as much texture as you want. It's just based on 2 images. Every brush is based on 2 images. One is the shape, this one, so that's sort of the tip of the brush that you move around, and then it's the grain, which is kind of like the tile, the texture that you, kind of like the surface sort of what you are painting on. And you can also smudge out, so on this brush, for example, you don't really see the flower grain when I paint, but that's because I sort of put on the brakes on it, so it's kind of smudging instead. So if I push this up, you see the flower will sort of appear, and if I paint now, you can see the flower. So that's also a cool thing. You can put in any grain, but you can also distort it, so it just does interesting things instead of being this image. And also like this one here, it's just some stripes together with this nice grain. So, and you can make it follow your line like this, and it has so many adjustments and all kinds of things how you can tailor your brush. And if you use Procreate, I would really recommend play with this. I also have a tutorial on making the brushes. And of course the Apple Pencil, here you put in the opacity or the size adjustment for the pressure on the pen. And another cool thing is some of these brushes are, the dynamics is on glazed, so a regular brush, if you paint over your own lines without lifting the brush, it becomes darker and darker, like here. This is sort of like the normal way a brush works. And you also have this in Photoshop. If you have this one is glazed, so it's, the difference is here, this one is just turned on. If it's turned off, it behaves like the other one. It paints over its own lines. But if this glazed is on, then it only paints with the pressure I press. So if I press harder, it's kind of like a marker. So it's very nice. And you kind of see this, it's almost like a watercolor way of blending into its own line. So that's, sometimes you don't want this doubling all the time when you paint. But if you lift it up for each stroke, then it will paint over itself. So as long as you have it down, you get these really nice transitions. And this is just these 2 images put together, opacity and size on the stylus. And I'm going to show you a couple of other favorites here, just to show you some diversity. Here's my pencil. So this is the one that I've gotten to look most like a regular pencil. So it has really nice blend, and the texture I think is good. So yeah, if you want it to kind of look like you drew it with a pencil, or you have really rough big ones, that it's nice to start out sometimes. You start out rough. Very often I will work on a gray background. This is like a typical startup. And then I will work with a bit darker gray. So whatever I want to create, I will stay away from the whites, and I will stay away from the blacks, because they have so much power. I want to save them. And very often I will paint kind of grayscale in the beginning just to focus on value. And right now, this is the quick menu right here. I just drag my finger, or I can just press and flip. Yeah, so the quick menu, I'm just so used to it now, so I can just drag it wherever I want it. I can pick. The thing with the quick menu, it's brilliant. It makes your workflow super fast. Because if you're used to Photoshop, you're used to having your hand on the keyboard, having your shortcuts, and I think that's also a big thing for artists that want to sort of convert. Like, I don't have the keyboard, I don't have the shortcuts. But now you basically do, because one thing is the two-finger undo. If I just tap like this with 2 fingers, I undo. If I tap with 3 fingers, I redo. So that's a quick way of undo and redo. And now the quick menu, you have 6 choices here, and you can basically, if I hold on one, I can put in whatever I want here, whichever tool, or also whichever brush. So you can actually, how to evoke the quick menu. So you go into the settings, and then prefs, and then at the bottom it says advanced gesture controls. There. I wish I had a mirror too, I can see. I don't have to break my neck watching. And there you have, right now, if you have the Apple Pencil, I really recommend putting the quick menu just on touch. Here. Because then you just touch with 1 finger and the quick menu appears. And then you can also do the gesture by dragging it. You don't have to even see it. You don't have to touch and then press the horizontal. You can do that if you want. That's also pretty fast. But you can also just drag it in this direction. Then I basically just press in the middle and drag it in this, and I let go. So it becomes super fast when you. Let me see, I changed brush now. Yeah, so you're painting, you're doing your thing, and then I want the eraser, for example. So I have the eraser upwards and the brush downwards. So I just I use the brush and then I do this. Now I got the eraser. Then I flip horizontally and back to the brush again. So it's super. It really makes for a fast setup. So the workflow becomes so much better. So that's one of the best toys I've gotten in this app. And workflow is so important. Also, when I start out on a painting, I recommend, like you all know about thumbnails, painting small, and I really, really recommend that. I usually have my canvas the size of a credit card in the beginning. That's sort of a go-to size until I can't have that size anymore. But I try not to zoom in before I really, really have to. So about this size, like this here. So on my setup here, I have erase up, paint down, then flip horizontally, perspective assist, which I will come back to because of the new perspective tool, and then alpha lock. And alpha lock, for those of you who don't know that locks the opacity on anything in that layer. So if I choose another color now and I paint over this drawing, it will just paint over it. But if I alpha lock it, I can slide to the right on the menu here. Now it will just paint on the content of the layer. But in my quick menu, I can either press here or just slide up like this. So you can sort of have it on and then now it's off again. So the quick menu is beautiful. And just to pick colors, you just hold the finger steady at one point, and then you get the color picker. So workflow-wise, it's become fantastic. This, especially with this quick menu. So I'm just doodling a little here, and I really wanted to show you the perspective tool as well, and also some adjustments. Like you have your transform, and if you hold the corners down, you could change the aspect, so you can put perspective or change perspective on any texture, which is really nice and powerful. Or you can just use 2 fingers to scale up and down. Or you can also put on this magnetic at the bottom, you see. I'm gonna laser my own eyes doing this. I'm just gonna say at the bottom. Yeah. If you put on my magnetic, it will stick to a certain direction. So that's very nice if you want to put things into follow a certain perspective and you already got it into that perspective, it will maintain within the perspective. So that's also a great feature. So let's just start another now. If I were to do a environment piece, this room is kind of interesting. Maybe I will kind of mimic this room. Then I start on a white background just before I kind of get started, and then you have the perspective tool, which is under canvas back there. On top there, you just turn on perspective guide, and then edit perspective guide. And if I tap anywhere now, I'll get a vanishing point. And if you only want one vanishing point, like a center perspective, 1 point perspective, that's all nice and good. If you want to change the angle of the horizon line, you can just grab that little thing there and then tilt it. But if you want a couple of, I very often tend to go towards a 3-point perspective. It's more dynamic and it's a bit more fun, I think. And then one thing you gotta take care of is if you have these 2 points on the horizon line, they have to be on each side of the center. I couldn't have 1 point here and then the other point there, and they're on the same side of the center of the canvas. They need to be on opposite sides. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. But the closer they are, the more wide angle your lens is. The further apart, the more tele zoomed in your lens is. So that's also something to think about. And you can have the horizon line doesn't need to be on the page. Like the lower the horizon, the higher you look. So sometimes it's nice to put it, you can put it down here. And then you get a very interesting, really looking upwards on buildings, for example. So perspective is super fun to play around with, and I really recommend looking into it. Also have a tutorial on that if you want. And then the 3-point, the one on top here. So what's important with the 3-point is that you can't push it on any of the sides. It needs to be in the center of it needs to be 90 degrees on the horizon line in the center of your canvas. So if I would flip my horizon line like this would basically be like rolling the camera. Then I need to follow with my 3rd point. So it's always 90 degrees in the middle here. So rotating the horizon line, you need to follow with the 3rd point. But let's keep it like this for now. Okay, done. So you have the color. If I go back into edit, at the lower part, I can choose how much opacity I want on the perspective grid, or how thick there should be. But I would love to also have a chance to change brightness. I just want them black or just white. So there's an easy workaround for that, is to just press with 4 fingers. You remove the menu, snap your fingers together, the canvas will fill the screen. Then do a screenshot. Import that as a separate image. And when you have magnetic on, and you press this one, there, and the magnetic, then it will fill out and be exactly where your perspective grid is. Now you can just put it into multiply layer mode. Now I can turn off this perspective guide. This is just my own workaround on it. You don't have to do this. You can just use the ones that's in Procreate. But I just want to show you so you know a way of. And then I just turn down the opacity from the adjustment menu. And then I use curves to sort of make them really nice and black, but also pushing the brights up here so it's not a gray multiply layer. Something like that. And then I just adjust the layer opacity down so it's just faded out like this. So that's a typical startup. That's why I wanted a white background, so on the multiply layer it will be totally transparent. And I will always keep this, we can call this persp, like that. I will always keep this on top. And I can always turn it on and off like this. And I can always, I touch it with 2 fingers. It's a shortcut for getting into opacity mode. So that's also very, or I can go over here and press opacity on top there. That's the same thing. And then I turn my background more gray. So I can go both ways. I can go brighter, but I can also go darker. So that's a typical startup for any environment. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, this was sort of the first original color picker from Procreate. And then they also added a new one, which is also under prefs. Classic color picker is the one I have. If I turn that off, it looks like this. Yeah, so it's I'm just used to the other one. A lot of people like this one, but what I like with the other one is if you have a color and you just want to go a bit more saturated, but on that color, you can just adjust this thing here. If you want just brightness and not more saturation, you adjust this one. Or if you just want to adjust the hue, you can go here. So it's very, like you paint with an orange and you just want it slightly more red, and it's kind of easy to mess up on the wheel. Maybe it makes it a bit more playful, but I feel I have much more control with this classic color picker. And you also can build up, like if I love this color, for example, I can just press down on the palette there, and then I got it. So that's a way of, and if you don't want it anymore, you can just drag it out, throw it away. So that's, you can fill up new ones, or you could just press plus here, and you can make your own swatches with different funny themes. So it's very, very cool and useful color palette. And if you're working with web, for example, and you need a specific RGB value, you press this little thing there. My back is going to be out of order after this. So then you get all the RGB values. So that's if you need a specific color. So again, picking a slightly darker gray than the background, but not black. And a brush that I just made yesterday, which I kind of like, is is this one. It's just this long thing, but each time I set it down, I put it so it's randomized, the blue thing that turned on. So each time it will be on a different angle. So if I do a line, it will create different sort of lines, but it still has that structure in it, which I think is a kind of a good playful thing if you want to make buildings that is not just one line. And now comes the cool perspective part. So if I press this layer, on the right side you have perspective assist. If I turn this on my quick menu, it's on my lower right, then any line I will do now will just stay in perfect perspective. So it's so easy and fun, and you can do whatever you want, and it sticks. Sorry? Yeah. You just press the layer once to get this black menu, and then it's on the right side. And it doesn't pop up if you haven't sort of created a perspective in that canvas, then it's not a choice. So if you create the perspective first, then you'll have this perspective tool. And then it's almost too much fun to just sit there and fiddle with these perspective lines. And it's very intuitive, and if I drag a line, and I will... Another thing which I feel is also a part of this is the quick line, which if I with perspective assist on or off, if I do a line and I hold it down, I can put it wherever I want. So even if the perspective assist is off, if I draw a line and I hold it down, in the end it will snap, and then I can... So if I want a straight line, but I don't want it to be within the perspective, for example, let's say an angled little roof here, I can just wait until it snaps. And how the quick line works? Well, first, if you drag the line, then you can, let's say I wanted to hit that corner of the roof there, but I'm too zoomed out, so I'm just setting it there, and then I can zoom in, and then I press, because it's the last thing I did, the quick line, I press the transform, the arrow at the top. I can readjust exactly where it is, and the beginning and the end of it. So maybe I want it from this to this. And when I press the arrow again, I set it. So if I press the arrow now, it will be just regular transform. So you have that one chance to sort of make it perfect, and then to do this super detailed adjustments. There's no warp yet, no. Yeah, warp would be cool. Yeah, you have smudge, which you can, but then you'll smudge it at the same time as you warp it. But these Procreate guys, they usually add a lot of cool new things all the time, so I'm not going to be surprised if the warp tool also popped up anytime soon there. So I also work as a beta tester for them, and very often they just released a new version, and then they're like, and here's the new beta. I was like, what? You just released the version and I'm already working on the next. So these guys are busy. So this is a typical startup for me if I want to do an environment. So when you have a perspective like this, it's always nice to have that one vanishing point on the page, because it will you need some, or you should have some sort of payoff, because it drags attention to the vanishing point. So it's always nice to sort of, when I do my own artwork and it's not a specific brief that I have to follow, I very often just create an environment first before I have a story or before I have any character, just to sort of, I want to see the location before I invent the story, kind of thing. And sometimes I create the character and then the environment around. I think both ways are really nice, and to have to do both, to be not to have one sort of locked way of working, but to have just playfulness and to try all kinds of things. I think that's the most important thing you can do to develop as an artist. And to do sketches, do a lot of sketches. Do thumbnails and try not to zoom in too early. Keep it small as long as you can. Even if you make characters or if you make environments, that's really a high recommendation. So this is kind of like, I think London is very inspiring because it has so many layers and so many buildings behind each other, and you see these cool skylines everywhere. So I'm very inspired by London. And also this sort of green brick that you don't really get anywhere else. So I'm really fiddling. I try to keep it playful, and I have sort of I don't have a picture in my mind, but I try to just create this environment out of shapes. It's basically like you see basic shapes, squares and lines and cubes, and then with more or less detail on. And you can always like make a selection. This is the you have a freehand selection. If I press the S, you have the freehand at the bottom. And this is the one you can sort of tap from point to point. You can go around tapping, or you can do you can draw with it with the same. It's sort of like a polygon selection and lasso in one tool, which is great. You don't need two tools when you can have the same in one. So that's awesome. And then you can either invert the selection at the lower part. If I press minus, it will select the outside of the selection. If I press plus, it will select the inside of the selection. And you can always invert the selection later. And the freehand selection, or no, the automatic selection is like the magic wand in Photoshop. So I hold it down and then I just drag it to the right. So then it will sort of eat itself into. Right now my one part of the drawing here is not sort of completed. So I would need to, before I do this, I will just close this one building here, like this. So if it's a small opening, you might get away with it, but it could be good to just have, to close it a bit more. So let's try it now. Automatic, so there I can select. And the white is sort of then eating how much you want it to eat into your drawing. So I select these two parts and then I press the two angles towards each other. That's the invert. This one. And then I fill another layer with a slightly brighter color, so it will. Then I can maybe go a bit brighter just so you see. And one thing with, just checking the values here. How am I doing on time? Oof. 1 hour is just not enough. When you do this with filling a selection with the automatic, one thing to watch out for is that the edges become super hard, very pixelated. So what I do then is to use the next to the top there, Gaussian blur, and I just blur it about 4%. That's kind of like anti-aliasing. It will still be a nice hard edge, but it will take away that really pixelated thing. And then I also wanted to show you, because I wish I had 2 hours right now, just getting warm. But this will be just showing you all the tools, and then I'll do demoing later, and then I can show you more detailed continuing. Because now I would lock the alpha on this, and I would lock the alpha on this, and then with, for example, this one, the glazed brush. Yeah, I'm in the right layer. Then you can sort of start to put in value really rough. And start to kind of get a sense for which direction the light is coming from. Switch brushes. Put on the perspective assist on this one as well. And then maybe go slightly darker on the outline, just so it doesn't disappear. So you could pretty quickly have some sort of feel for where the light is coming from. And the cool thing now is that you could also go bright now, right? So you can have that sun coming in. So that's the cool thing with having this. Do not start on white, because then this wouldn't show at all. But just to give you that certain value difference, that's so powerful to put in. And I go a bit too bright now, but just to show you the impact of it. And then I often choose value from my painting. And be playful. You see how sort of rough and just a dot there, a thing there. You know, I don't really. I try as much as possible to stay away from starting to detail. Just put in some nips here and there. And then also you have. Are you familiar with the term ambient occlusion? Yeah. For those of you who aren't, it's sort of the soft shadows that is automatically happening in corners, and also at the top of a building. Like in town, it's always going to be darker towards the bottom of a building, because the other buildings will cast this shadow, and it's more apparent on a gray day like this, because then you don't have the sunlight. Then everything has, like, up towards in corners and where lights get more shut out, to get these soft shadows, which is also something which is which is very powerful, and which makes it. I'm just shutting off perspective assist. So just to create it a bit darker towards the bottom of your buildings like this will already make it more believable. So just easy things like this, and then I might pick the outline and then sort of do the same on them, so that now I'm just painting on the lines itself to make them pop a bit more. And what I wanted to show you, I can probably go over 5 minutes over time, can't I? I started a bit late, so yeah. So windows, for example, if you want to make a cityscape, then windows are important. And one way to do it is I usually have all the windows on a separate layer, but maybe the same layer, so all the buildings have the windows together. And then so one way to do it is to put on perspective assist, and then just create some lines, for example, like this, and then use the eraser, same brush, and then you can sort of remove. So this is, it's hard to be accurate with this, but you can kind of get like a playful set of windows. You can also use like a brush like this, which is several, it's these two put together, so then you get more lines for each line you do, like this, and then you can eat into that. So this is one quick and dirty way of making windows. And then having that on a separate layer, you can lock the alpha. I will turn off a perspective assist, go to my airbrush, and I try to maintain texture in all my brushes. So my airbrush is not the perfect airbrush. It is this spray, so it gives texture as well. So then you can kind of create some nice, that's the strength with having them in a separate layer. But now comes the fun part. Let's say you want a bit more elaborate window, you don't want this silly square. Then you can paint the window. Let me just show you. Because like I showed you, every brush is built up of two images, one shape and one grain. And the grain is being tiled all the time. So it's one tile which will be repeated in infinity every direction. So if you want a texture that you want repeated infinity in every direction, you can make that and just use it as a, for example, this is one grain that I used as window, so you can just paint the whole wall full of these, or this one. They're pretty rough, pretty sketchy, but once they're enough of them and you put them on the wall, it looks pretty good. So that's what I'm going to show you now. So you can use this tiling, which if you want a rough texture, you kind of hate the tiling because you see that a rough texture is repeated several times. But if you want to have that, like this, for example, let's see which windows I have. This one is the one that I showed you. So it's built up of these two sources. So again, I make a new layer, and I usually just go black or white, and then I can, let's say, this is maybe a bit too much windows, so you can do a selection of, maybe I just need it's automatic freehand. Maybe I just want this part, for example. Then I invert selection, and then 3 fingers down to get this menu, and press cut. That will cut away the outside of my selection. Now I can transform this into, let's say, if you want to move around, I press freeform now, because now I can rotate. Maybe I want them this way instead. If you want to get closer, like you want to zoom in, but have the transform active at the same time, you just hold down on the arrow, and then you can zoom at the same time. Okay, yeah, super. So I hold my one finger down on the blue arrow on top there, and then you'll see that these blue dots will disappear. These ones. That means I can zoom on the canvas itself, but still have this transform active. So I can still move this around and get closer. So let's see, maybe I want this on that wall, for example. Then I can move it, put the corner. Then I usually just look at the grid, the perspective grid, and not the wall, because I want to have it in perfect perspective first. So I look at this corner and other corners of my perspective grid. So I first set it in perspective. once I did that, I can just grab the middle handles, these ones, and if I hold them down, they will get loose. But if I just grab them and move them right away, they will stick in perspective. So it's a lot to take in on this one tool, but once you get used to it, you will love it. So here you can sort of, like, how many floors would be natural to have on this building? Like, this would be too much. This would be, I kind of see the horizon line as kind of the height of a man or so when you're standing and looking. So it will probably be more natural with 4 stories in that building. Maybe even just 3. I put it like this. And then I can always cut away what I don't need. And then I merge down in the middle there together with the other. And then I continue working like this. So let's do that again. New layer. So I always just merge down to one and the same. So I just paint this on a separate, so these are way too big. And then I just need to go into the brush, scale, grain down. So there you see how you can also have almost like just a grid pattern if you make it small enough. So maybe it's I want it a little smaller. Yep. Hi. Yep, or 2 or... Yep. Okay, so didn't I make them smaller?
Did you ever experience any lag in brushes?
No, not really. If I sometimes, very seldomly, it might lag just a little, and then it's back again. But it's no issue really. I'm gonna finish here soon. Is there any last questions before I? Yeah. To edit the quick menu, you tap it so it pops up, and then you hold down, and then the selections pop up, and then you choose whatever you want. And if you want, like on this one, I've chosen a specific brush. Then you go into select brush. You see the arrow. Go in there, and there you have your brush sets, and then you choose the brush that you want there. So, last sort of putting into perspective. So to do a really, and also to do this with textures on the buildings, like some are really dirty and you can give it a nice texture, but like this now, this would be in the correct perspective, but the amount of floors on that building would sort of go against each other on one wall to the other. So it's, if you're really into perspective and you want to create good environments, it's important to sort of like to sort of end up with about the same position with the windows, and the closer the buildings are, that it adds up, so it doesn't have like 10 stories on one side of the building and then 3 on the other. And then to merge that one again, because then you can go into your soft brush and have fun with getting some different, maybe these pick up more light, or that's always something to also think about, is that the top windows they will reflect the sky, but the lower windows will reflect other buildings, which makes them usually darker, lower on the building. So that's also nerdy stuff to think about when you're painting. So I think I have to stop now. Yeah. Any last questions? Feel free to just find me by the cafe. I'm set up with the Art Studio Online and the Procreate setup, and also doing some demos later, so just grab me. Okay? Thank you.